Hello everybody, it's Casey here. So if you've been watching my channel for a while now, then you may remember that a few years back I did actually a pair of videos which was primarily inspired by the Nostalgia Critic, but in the years since I've also seen similar movie review channels that have also done this, and it's a subject that kind of interests me. It is movies that everybody disagrees with you on. That is being, what are the movies that you just completely despise, but everyone else and their mother loves them? And reversely, what are the movies that you like, but everyone else seems to hate? So if you've been keeping tabs on my channel for a while, then you may remember that I did two videos covering this very subject back to back. And what was kind of noteworthy about it was that was believe to be the very first time that I had ever actually gotten live on camera to talk to you guys. Up until that point, there was either no narration in my videos at all, or if it was, then it's in similar vein to my other top 10s and other videos where it's just me and the microphone and I'm reading off a script that I've written and everything. So that was my first attempt at trying to get over my fear of public speaking and being on camera. And also, I had like a few notes with me, but for the most part I was speaking largely without a script or anything. I was just trying to speak more the way I would talk to my friends or just anybody on the street. I was trying to do it more off the cuff. And it could be argued how much of a success it was or not, although I can at least say that from that experience, I think I did get better at not being so nervous in front of camera, and probably as attested by all of different reaction videos that I've done now, that I think I've gotten better at just not freaking out whenever the camera's on me. Now that it's been a few years, recently I was looking through my top 10 playlist on my channel, and just as I was looking at it, those two videos, even just by the thumbnails you can tell that they really just more and more to me just started to really stick out like a sore thumb. Especially because I didn't have a lot of the tech that I do now, especially in regards to sound. I mean, even the microphone that I'm using here is just like a very cheap basic microphone, but even then I would like to think that my sound quality has still gotten way better than it did last time. I'm still using the same camera to record, but back then I didn't have any microphones or anything yet, so I was just relying on the camera's microphone, which, yeah, you can hear me, but the quality is just not great. And of course the lighting wasn't really all that great either. Even with all the lights in my room turned on, I was still getting glares, and it was very out of focus and stuff. And I'm sure at the time it was the best that I could do, but now that it's been a couple years, looking back on it, this was the one thing that I thought, you know what, I really want to go back and redo this, especially because, and maybe it's not noticeable to you guys, but it definitely is to me, but especially since that was the first time I was speaking off the cuff on camera, I was definitely nervous, and even with the editing I could do, I was really fumbling over my lines and stuff. And so normally I kind of just leave my old videos alone and just focus on trying to just make my next project even better than the last one. But this is the one time that I really felt that those two videos desperately needed a refresh on them. Especially because over the years, I think some of my choices have now changed. You'll notice in these new lists, there's definitely going to be a lot of repeaters on this, but I think there's definitely going to be some new entries in the list too, and the order's going to be a little different. And this time I have decided to work off of a script, and I was able to organize my thoughts a lot better. So for those of you who remember or are interested in watching those older videos, you'll definitely notice in this new one that I was just able to articulate my thoughts a lot better on a few of the subjects here, which we'll get into it as we go along here. But yeah, this is something that I normally don't do, but just the more I looked at it, I was like, yeah, this definitely needs a redo, not just to help better explain my thoughts on these movies, but also just to have better sound quality, better picture quality, and yeah, it was about time for a refresh. And obviously remember that all of this, just like in any of my other videos, all of this is just opinion. If you like or dislike any of these movies, it doesn't say anything about you, like whether you're a smart or dumb or a good or bad person or anything. Or if you have any taste or anything at all. Like, I just find this interesting, and just like the Nostalgia Critic said years ago, it all just comes down to how well can you explain yourself. And especially in the years since, looking at other people's videos on this subject, I've heard the strangest things that people like and don't like, and even movies that I think are masterpieces that people hate, they at least explain the more personal reasons of why they don't like it, and I'm fine with that. I just find that interesting. So be sure to leave comments in the videos here and let me know, like, what are the movies that you always seem to disagree with people? Are there ones that you just can't stand that everyone else just sings praises about? Or what are the ones that you think have, like, oh, why can nobody see the genius, and everyone else just hates it? And the other thing is that I'm not going to delete the old videos. I am still going to keep them up more for posterity's sake. I'll probably even link the original old videos in the description box for this new one. So if you are newer to this channel and you're interested in looking back at what my quality used to be like compared to now, then feel free. I think it is like a neat experiment to see just like how far along that you yourself can personally improve on your craft and everything. But I definitely think that in the future, any future new people that may ask me questions about this subject, about movies that I like or don't like, I'm probably going to, from now on, link them to these new videos that I'm making. But like I said, I'll still keep the old videos up. I'm not going to get rid of them. But yeah, it was high time for a makeover. So without further ado, these are the top 10 films that I like that everyone else seems to hate, remastered. Number 10. Jurassic Park 3. Alright, fair warning now, there's 3 new entries on this updated list, and all of them are at the end, with the rest of this countdown being golden oldies from the old video. However, the order has switched around quite a bit for reasons we'll get into. This was originally higher on the list, but it got bumped to the back now because after the mixed to disappointing reactions to the Jurassic World sequels, I think more people have changed their views on this in the years since. I haven't heard as much backlash towards this one as I used to. However, it still has its detractors, so I'm here to give it its fair shake. It's not as preachy or deep or complicated as the first 2 films, far from it. But honestly, that's part of its appeal to me. As great as the first film is, admittedly, it has to get through quite a lot of setup and slow parts before it really gets going. Same with the sequel. But this one cuts right to the chase and gives us a simple story with great action sequences that harkens back to old fantasy jungle adventure films from the 30s and 40s like King Kong. What's especially interesting to me is how the events of the novel were split up and incorporated into all 3 original films, with this one having an equivalent to the river raft scene and the pterodactyl birdcage sequence. That part where they're on the catwalk and the pterodactyl stomps towards them out of the fog is still one of the scariest, or at least creepiest, jump scares of all the movies, at least to me. And the dinosaur that eats the phone and you hear hear the ringing in his stomach is darkly hilarious. As for the characters, which is what most people seem to have a problem with, I didn't mind them at all. Yeah, the couple looking for their kids start off a bit annoying, but this probably is how real people would act in this situation, and the experience brings them closer together, so they do get a bit of an arc. And part of the course for this franchise, it's interesting to get a group of people who aren't your traditional action heroes. They're all just average people thrown into an unbelievable situation. Yeah, the kid surviving on his own for so long with just his Boy Scout skills is a bit of a stretch, but hey, this is an action-adventure series with clone dinosaurs. I think we can let tiny bits like this slide. And stranger things have happened in real life, so why not? While this film doesn't really have anything new to contribute to the lore or the setting, I think that's okay. It's ultimately harmless. If you're in the mood to watch a simple but darkly fun adventure with tons of dinosaur action and a plot that makes its point quickly and gets on with it, then give this movie another chance. Number 9. Fantastic Four. Another fair warning to you now, get ready to have a bunch of superhero films on this list, as this genre tends to bear the brunt of criticism, especially among comic book fans. Here's another one that was farther up last time but got bumped back a bit because after the abysmal Fanforstic movie, I think more people are now not being as harsh on this one, and it's certainly a step above Roger Corman's attempt, though even I think that one isn't as bad as everyone says, and you can watch my reaction video to get all the details on that. One of the main complaints I remember being thrown at this was how supposedly annoying the characters were and how much they argued with each other. But that's pretty much what the comics were and are like, and that was part of their initial appeal. This probably is how real people would react to getting superpowers. Some bask in the spotlight and show off, some want to study it, some are afraid of it, some don't want it, and some go mad with power and abuse it. Most of all, I really appreciate the practical effects used on the Thing rather than just CGIing him everywhere. Michael Chiklis did such a fantastic job portraying him both in attitude and voice. He is Ben Grimm to me. Granted, the story is nothing to write home about. It's your standard people suddenly get superpowers and have to figure out what to do superhero origin. But now in hindsight, in the post-MCU era, it's so odd to go back and watch something that was its own separate universe not connected to anything, and starring Chris Evans no less in his pre-Captain America days. Seriously, now that we're dipping into multiverse stuff, I really hope the MCU gives us an in-joke about this. And after Mr. Fantastic's mixed bag introduction into the MCU, no spoilers here, it's up in the air as to how the four are going to be finally introduced. But if it's anything like this, I think we'll be alright. Let's just hope the MCU does Galactus better justice than this movie's sequel. Now, the backlash towards that film, I'm in full agreement with, though the Silver Surfer himself was fine. But this first outing, well, it may not be that fantastic, but it's certainly no Fanforstic either. Number 8. The Green Hornet. Alright, pretty much everything that I had to say about this one was already covered in the original video, so I'll try and make this brief. Comedy is a subjective thing, so maybe part of the reason this got bashed so much is because the funny bits in this just didn't do it for a lot of people. But I don't know, I thought nearly everything in this was hilarious. After seeing so many superhero films that are either super serious and or have main protagonists who quickly become experts in what they do, I thought it was really refreshing to get a pair of friends who are eager to become masked superheroes, and they totally suck at it, giving us a far more realistic take on what would actually happen if two genre-savvy nerds decided to put on costumes and fight crime. Or, well, Britt Reed is terrible at it. Kato is the one doing most of the legwork, which, thank you, movie, for acknowledging an asset of the old TV show that many fans of which have noted time and again. And speaking of the original show, I honestly think the real reason this gets hated on so much is simply because of the Green Hornet name being attached to this. Fans of the character were probably wanting something more dark and serious like the original show or radio programs, and were disappointed to find it turned turned it into a borderline slapstick comedy. But speaking as someone who has watched the TV show, I didn't mind the shift in tone at all. If the TV show had added in a bit more camp and humor like the Adam West Batman series that aired at the same time and was produced by the same studio and writers, maybe it would have turned out a bit like this movie. I have a theory that had this film been a 100% original thing and they had just changed the names and a few character elements around, then maybe more people would have accepted it. But the second the Green Hornet name was brought in, suddenly the majority of the audience's standards changed. Either way, it may not be exactly like the TV show in terms of tone, but all of the funny moments that I can remember and quote to this day more than make up for it. Number 7. Daredevil. Funny that the film that made it to my number 1 spot last time is now all the way back at number 7, probably because in the years since I made that original video, I was finally able to watch the Netflix series, and yeah, there's really no comparison. The Netflix version is far and away the superior adaptation in terms of basically everything. Story, characters, villains, the works. But that's not to say that I now hate this movie. On the contrary, I still have a soft spot for it, as it served as my primary introduction to this character. The soundtrack is still awesome, Bullseye is still entertaining to watch, the funny moments are still funny, and I'll make the bold statement and say that this film has the superior depiction of the radar sense. Whether it was a creative choice or for budgetary reasons, I don't know, but the whole melty oil painting world on fire thing in Netflix wasn't as impressive or clear to me, and it doesn't help that they only do the effect once in the entire show's run and never again. This entry is also towards the middle now because since the MCU version is so popular, at this point I think most people have straight up forgotten this even exists anymore, and I do think it's a shame. I think more young people who have grown up strictly with the MCU should go back and see what it was like to watch these random, non-interconnected superhero flicks that came out once every couple of years and not practically once a month like it is now. But for anyone out there who has never seen this and is interested in giving it a go, I strongly recommend you watch the director's cut, not the theatrical cut. The director's cut has more material and is just better edited all around. And be sure to give the old Trial of the Incredible Hulk movie a try too, and see The Man Without Fear's first live-action depiction. I'm actually pretty fond of that film as well. Bottom line, Charlie Cox may be the perfect Daredevil, but it never hurts to go back and discover your roots, as it were. As the saying goes, you gotta walk before you can run. Number 6. Ghost Rider. Not the last superhero movie on this list, but the last one to come out from the era before every film had to have an interconnected universe. I'm in full agreement that the sequel, Spirit of Vengeance, is awful, but the first one still remains pretty entertaining to me. Here's a character who made a bad decision out of desperation to save someone, and now he's paying for it, but then finds a way to use his demonic powers as a force for good. Granted, if you want to see a superhero with dark origins fighting for justice, then Hellboy is a far better choice to go with. But that said, I think this one's alright. In most versions of the comic origin, Johnny Blaze made the deal with the devil on purpose, whereas here, it's framed more as an accident, a desperate kid trying to do good and not realizing what he's gotten himself into until it's too late, which is the angle I prefer. Actually, there's a lot of creative choices made in this film that I think make it unique and stand out more. You have a superhero with an odd assortment of abilities, and he doesn't get all of his powers right away. All throughout the story, even up to the very end, he's still discovering all the things he can do. And on a related note, his battles with the elemental demons means he can't just spam the same attack over and over, but has to figure out a unique way to defeat each one of them. Although yes, I won't deny, the villains remaining in their mostly human forms for the entire movie is kinda lame, but moving on. Also, how often do we get a superhero story where the main protagonist doesn't even attempt to keep their alter ego a secret from their love interest? I love how Roxanne can immediately see through Johnny's BS, so he's like, Screw it, why don't I just tell her everything? And of course he comes off as a total lunatic when he literally describes what's happening to him. Roxanne's expressions throughout his total info dump and the way she keeps eyeballing the exit is hilarious and understandable. And then you've got the utterly cool design of the Hell Cycle, the great shots of him driving up and down walls, that awesome sequence of him and the previous rider racing through the desert together on a flaming horse. I mean, come on, the movie's worth watching for that image alone. Honestly, I recommend listening to the director's commentary sometime. He talks all about the various choices they made and why they did it, and for the most part, I agree with him. Everyone in this looks like they had a fun time making this, and that's the key word here. Fun. The plot isn't the greatest thing ever written, not by a long shot, but damn if it isn't a fun ride. Number 5. Masters of the Universe. Okay, here's another one that I think I effectively said my piece on in the original video, so I'll make this entry brief. I'm not denying this movie's got its problems here and there, with some effects that haven't aged well, some hokey moments, and that ending where the main character magically gets her dead parents back is questionable to say the least. It turns into your typical magical people from another dimension come to our world and hijinks ensue plot. But much like Ghost Rider, it may not be the greatest thing ever, but I can't deny that I have fun watching it. And much like the Green Hornet, this is another case where if the filmmakers had just created an entirely original cast of characters, then this probably would have been better received. But because it has the He-Man name attached to it, fans of the cartoon have torn it to shreds. And in many respects I can't blame them, but in my particular case, I never watched the cartoon and to this day I still haven't, so any possible inaccuracies didn't and don't bother me. I just saw it for what it was, a decent, if a bit hokey, fun fantasy adventure. Basically, your enjoyment of this will most likely depend on whether you saw the cartoon or not. If you did, you'll probably hate it, but if you're like me who has never watched it and just go in blind and treat it as a standard fantasy adventure movie, you'll probably enjoy it more. Number 4. Terminator Genesis. Now that Dark Fates received so many scathing reviews, I wonder how many people will look back on this and change their tune about it. I was actually shocked by a lot of the negative reviews this was getting back when it came out. Of course, most of the time nothing will be as good as the original, but at a certain point I think people get so wrapped up in their nostalgia that they can't or won't accept change and or a new spin on the movie they loved. There are so many nods and homages to the previous films, and they're not just there to wave to the fans, but are actually integral to the plot. The idea of taking a storyline we're so familiar with and turning it on its head makes for an exciting experience that finally dishes out some true surprises. Judgment Day is no longer inevitable, and this time the heroes may have a shot at finally earning their happy ending. All the main characters do a great job and grow as time goes on. Kyle is the seasoned soldier who starts off confident in his mission, only to have to learn to put his faith in Sarah when the initial plan goes horribly wrong, and dealing with the awkward notion of her protecting him and not the other way around. Sarah, having been raised by a Terminator in this altered timeline, is a capable fighter, but has become so focused on the mission she's seemingly become the very thing she's fighting against and must learn how to open up and act human again. And as for the T-800, while he's his usual gritty and stoic self, his relationship with Sarah serves as the centerpiece, leading to more than a few funny as well as surprisingly touching moments, leading the viewer to wonder if he's beginning to develop actual human emotions. He's also there as a bit of a representation of the franchise itself. He's getting up there in age but can still do his job, or as he puts it, I am old, not obsolete. About the only negative thing I can say is that it pretty much requires you to have seen all the other previous movies. Otherwise, it can be hard to understand what's going on, especially when the time travel element starts exponentially mixing up and messing with the timelines. Time travel is always a tricky thing, and I've yet to see it done perfectly. You'll always inevitably run into paradoxes, so rather than risk your brain exploding at trying to wrap your head around all the time jumping and overlapping, just take it for what it is and you'll be sure to have a good time. It was the first Terminator film where I really couldn't guess where it was going, and it had the guts to try something new, and I think it deserves a bit of respect for that. Number 3. Thor: Love and Thunder. Finally, we're out of the golden oldies and on to the new editions, with this being the most recent film in terms of when they came out. This seems to have turned into one of those movies that you either like it or you don't. Well, since it's on this list, you can guess which camp I fell into. Much like the Green Hornet, here's another one where comedy can be subjective, and for me it worked. I like that this film isn't afraid to show the utter weirdness of the mystical side of the MCU while still bringing plenty of laughs and having characters react the way real humans would if thrown into these bizarre situations, all set to an amazing 80s rock ballad soundtrack. One of the main complaints hurled at the MCU is how it's getting more difficult to keep track of continuity and is becoming steadily inaccessible to newcomers, and while following the franchise up to this point certainly helps, this installment managed to find a way to summarize all the bullet points you need to know via one of the characters telling the story of Thor like one would a campfire tale or myth, so most newcomers shouldn't be too lost. Great example is my own mom, who has hardly watched any of the MCU beyond Phase 1, yet she was able to follow this movie just fine. This film also gives an explanation to how many and which mythologies exist within the Marvel Universe, and when the various gods are unwilling to help Thor, it gives off the subtle message that, while believing in a higher power and praying for good fortune isn't a bad thing, it's still up to us mortals to take action to make positive change happen. Case in point, Jane Foster finally returns after being absent from the MCU for so long, and we get to see her as Thor ripped straight from the comic books. Her excited energy at getting to be a superhero is adorable and contagious, and it's nice to see her and Thor patch up their relationship and go into full buddy cop mode while trying to save the world. But for all the laughs, the film doesn't shy away from the seriousness of Jane contracting cancer and the fear and anger she feels at having a limited time to live, and how everyone walks on eggshells around her. And over the course of the adventure, our heroes, through her, will learn what it means to truly live and make the most of the time you have on this earth. Would you rather lie dormant, clinging to what precious minutes you have, or would you rather want to die fighting for those you love with the strength you have left? And conversely, Thor must learn that there's some fights that are impossible to win, and to respect his friends' wishes and let them choose their own fates. This all ties into the main villain Gore, who, although is a bit on the bland side in terms of personality, he at least has strong, clear, and understandable motives for why he does what he does. And without giving away any spoilers, let's just say the climactic end battle is nothing short of amazing and drives home the lesson that heroes can come from unexpected places, and that sometimes our prayers are answered, but not in the exact ways we thought they would. If the comedy just wasn't doing it for you and you thought this film should have been completely serious, that's perfectly understandable. But I was perfectly happy with it, and as for what ultimately happens to Jane Foster, well, let's just say she gets a bittersweet but still happy ending. Number 2. Wonder Woman 1984. I, like many, loved Diana Prince's first film outing and couldn't wait for the sequel, and when the news hit that this new story would be taking place farther along in time but still in the retro 1980s, I was even more intrigued. But upon it finally being released, this film was met with an incredibly divisive reception, to say the least. Much like Love and Thunder, here's another example of a film that you either like it or you don't. And while I'm mostly in the camp that liked it, I'll fully admit that the film has its flaws. Having the plot set in the 80s not only fills in the gaps of what Diana was doing all those years between World War I and the modern day of Justice League, but this was the age of the rise of businessmen and self-help tapes and the notion of just work hard and you can do anything, and if you can dream it, you can do it. I thought this theme played well into the two new antagonists who I enjoyed far more than the villains of the first film, who, while not bad, were arguably kind of forgettable. Maxwell Lord and Barbara, by contrast, are much more complex and interesting to me. Max loves his son and just wants to succeed in life, but doesn't realize his dreams and ambition is being taken too far until it's too late. And Barbara starts off as a kind but extremely socially shy and awkward person, and her desire to be more strong and self-confident gets twisted into a desire for power and control. The slow and gradual change these two go through is scary to watch, as it's a painful reminder that any one of us, no matter how decent we try to be, could go down the wrong path if we're not careful. Though they're the antagonists, I hesitate to call them straight up villains, as they were mostly decent people who became corrupted. Even Diana isn't exempt from getting a bit selfish. She's wiser and more mature since her first outing, but she's also guarded and has lost all of her friends throughout the years. Her wanting to reunite with Steve Trevor again leads to plenty of comedic moments, with Steve now as the fish out of water person in contrast to Diana from the first movie, and his reactions to modern day tech and fashion is hilarious. But little does she know that keeping him around is causing a horrible domino effect on everyone around her. Some people hated this aspect of the film, but I think just the opposite. I feel that it humanizes Diana more and shows that even the hero can make mistakes, and what matters is how you make up for and or correct that mistake. And by the end, the day is saved not with a typical knockdown drag-out fight, but with a heart-to-heart conversation. I'll fully admit and partially agree with the naysayers that the film has its share of flaws. The pacing isn't as tight as the first movie, the final fight between Diana and Barbara is a bit murky and dark and hard to tell what's going on, and the circumstances of how Steve Trevor is brought back is a bit convoluted and left many people questioning Diana's morality. They didn't have to overcomplicate things by having Steve's consciousness be in another guy's body. We're dealing with powerful magical stuff already. Was it so hard to just say the stone brought Steve back to life? Heck, maybe that could have led to some kind of interesting Pet Cemetery scenario where Steve comes back a bit wrong. Or barring that, maybe Steve was content in the afterlife and didn't want to come back. There's so many other ways this could have gone rather than Steve's soul hijacking another dude's body. But now I'm just rewriting the movie. Most of all, I think the ending was a bit rushed. Without spoiling too much, after the day is saved, both of our antagonists kind of just disappear from the film without much talk of the repercussions of their actions. It's never shown where they went or what happened to them after the events of the movie, and it left me scratching my head a bit as to why such a vital bit of plot information would basically go ignored. However, in spite of all this, for me, the good stuff outweighed the bad. It's far from perfect, but I appreciate the different direction it went in to not just be a copy of the first movie. It teaches great lessons in how even the most innocent of desires can spiral out of control when you're not willing to back up your work with honesty, how absolute power corrupts absolutely, and of course the oldest line ever, be careful what you wish for. And the number one movie that I like that everyone else seems to hate is X-Men Dark Phoenix. Ever since the first film came out way back in 2000, I've long since followed the exploits of the X-Men film series. The franchise has had its highs and lows, but on the whole, nearly every movie has been an enjoyable, exciting ride for me. Even when the series went through its pseudo-soft reboot with First Class, I enjoyed the new, younger cast of actors just as much as the originals. However, with the coming of the Disney-Fox merger, it was announced that this movie would be the final film in the Fox X-Men universe. And to stack the cards against this movie even more, with a title like Dark Phoenix, it was no secret that this would basically be a reboot/do-over of The Last Stand, widely considered to be one of the worst movies in the franchise. Nonetheless, I still kept an open mind and held out hope that this finale to a series that's been going on for close to 20 years would be at least somewhat satisfying. In the end, it wasn't the greatest note to go out on, but it also wasn't the dumpster fire other reviewers were making it out out to be, and for me, it's far and away superior to The Last Stand. This could have had all the makings of a deep, thrilling, and emotional story arc, and it is, provided the story is given time to develop in, say, a TV show or trilogy of movies. However, as The Last Stand and now this film proves, the Phoenix storyline is an arc that just can't be done in one movie and would serve better as a miniseries like the 90s cartoon. The Dark Phoenix saga is very much an emotional, character-driven story. It's deeply personal to the X-Men. You have to care about the characters, especially Jean, in order for it to work, but we're never given enough time with Jean or Scott to build that personal connection to the characters, so the stakes never feel high enough. Only a couple characters get a standout moment with their powers, while others are kind of pushed to the wayside. In particular, one of the main characters die. I won't spoil who, but their death winds up feeling a bit cheap, as if it were done to just make Jean look more bad. It doesn't help that the aliens sent out to hunt down and extrapolate the Phoenix Force are the most flat, boring, one-note villains the franchise has ever had, and pretty much serve just one function: to give backstory and exposition about the Phoenix Force and where it comes from, and that's it. And you'd think the protagonist would be acting a bit more surprised at the fact that aliens exist, but nope, they're just another superpowered enemy to fight. Still, for all the negative I've just harped on, there is quite a bit of good this film has to offer. For one thing, the story sticks much closer to the comics, with the team going into space and the Phoenix Force being an alien, otherworldly power, as well as nods to the island of Genosha, where Magneto rules over his own group of mutants. All the actors do a great job with their characters and are the best thing about the movie, and do the best with what they're given, though most of them probably should have been given some age makeup to make them look at least a little bit older. And what they're given is far more streamlined plot than what the original Phoenix movie attempted. The Last Stand was a jumbled mess that had too much stuff going on, with a ton of action set pieces but a weak and hurried plot, and the Phoenix wound up taking a back seat and becoming little more than a plot device and footnote in the grand scheme of the movie. Here, however, this story properly puts all the focus on Jean Grey and becomes more of an introspective drama piece about her struggling to control and accept these godlike powers, as well as the team questioning what they truly want out of life, and that maybe what Professor X wants isn't what they want. And speaking of the Professor, Xavier is revealed to have done some questionable things, but it's made clear he only did what he did with the best of intentions, and he has to live with the consequences and apologizes in earnest, a far cry from the Last Stand's attempt at reconciliation. Though admittedly, a few of the characters seem to have a change of heart over their opinions of Jean and her Phoenix powers at the drop of a hat. Most of the conflicts and arguments just take a few sentences to resolve, and considering all the destruction the Phoenix caused and the fear of mutants that was instilled in humans again because of her, the semi-happy ending the film concludes with wraps up just a bit too neat and clean. However, Jean Grey caps off the film with a poignant speech that winds up being a bit meta and close to fourth wall breaking, as she basically says, "This franchise is in and of itself much like a phoenix. This may be the last Fox Studios film, and this franchise that's been around for close to 20 years may die, but the X-Men won't. The next time you see us, we'll be reborn in a new form, but we'll still be around." And honestly, that wasn't a half bad statement to go out on. While I'd say Logan and Days of Future Past would be the more well-constructed swan songs, it was at least nice to see the Phoenix be given a bit better justice than what was done in The Last Stand. The stuff that works is done really well, and the stuff that could have been better at least wasn't completely terrible. Whatever future lies in stores for the X-Men, I look forward to it. Well, that about wraps it up. It honestly felt pretty good to go back and improve on an old video that badly needed a makeover. Hopefully I didn't make any arch enemies here, and to remind you, this is all just my own opinion. If you hate any of these films, that's fine. I clearly just have different taste in what I find good or interesting. And if you're curious about the movies I hate that everyone likes, then be sure to check out the top 10 playlist on my channel. Be sure to subscribe for more similar content. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.